Okay, this is my 23rd lesson in a series of lectures on how the United States is starting a new Cold War with Russia. Right? Today we're going to focus on Russia's screwed up military force structure. I mean, it's bad. All right? In a previous lecture, we focused on Russia's material weakness. All right? We said in terms of weapons design and production, they are technologically inferior to Western nations, and on top of that, they have only very small production volumes. Most of the weapons are leftover Soviet-era weapons. In terms of maintenance and repair, their equipment and weapons undergo frequent breakdown. And in terms of transportation, logistics, and secure lines of communication, they're weak. They have big logistical problems. Okay, now on the human side, we're looking at the quality of Russian military men and factors that go into this. This is just a very general outline here. Well, one factor is recruiting. How do you get these guys? And we'll see that the vast majority of Russian military people are 1 year forced draft conscripts. All right, and they receive virtually no training on warfare. All right, they're just bodies to be used to support the war fighters. Right, they're being used to be truck drivers and toilet cleaners and cooks and whatever. And they're instilled with little discipline. They have low morale. I mean, it's horrible morale. No team building. Very poor small unit cohesion. And a lot of this is due to the brutal hazing that they undergo. All right. So, effective military force is created from effective utilization of resources. And you have two types of resources. You have human resources and material, right? We examined Russia's wretched material state. I don't want to try to review this. I mean, I'll just go through some numbers. I mean, we have, including NATO, 33, modern top flight aircraft carriers. They have one old, antiquated, broken down carrier. We have a ratio of 8 to 1 to fighter aircraft. Okay, our fighters versus their fighters, 8 to 1, and that doesn't include NATO, right? And they have a lot of the same aircraft we do. Okay, Russia can't pay for it. They're a poor country. They can't have a large military budget, right? And they have proven failures. Like aircraft, 104 to 0, mostly against Russian planes for the F-15. All right. Now we'll examine Russia's poor human resource development. All right. So there's going to be a likely attack. There's always an attack. And what they'll try to do, one thing they did already, they shifted all focus onto a single point attack, right? Shifting focus off of all the facts onto one little thing they can make debatable, right? Then they use that to characterize everything and say, it's all bullshit, right? With no one remembering a single fact, except this one debatable point that's waved in front of their face. Now, the debatable point is going to be the number of Russians killed at the Battle of Kashan, right? Because it's debatable. It's an isolated, trivial, single-point attack used to define everything. Or they'll just make a big, mocking wave attack using aggressive humor, right? Using one-word reality, history, right? Using the word history pejoratively, like, right? It's assumed that my history is bullshit history. Well, their history is no history. They do no research, right? Nothing. 99.999% will do no research. Nor will they retain a single thing from this lesson. They won't retain anything. They won't learn anything. Most aren't paying attention. The best they'll pay attention to is the simple, stupid thing being passed in social reality, which is a 10-second blurb written at a 4th grade level that any simpleton can understand. So all they will know is simple, baseless, dumbass wave that dominates social reality. That's all they'll know. Now, here's a note. I admit that I'm not a lifelong expert on Russian military force structure, but I've done substantial research, and all the sources I've run across say the same thing. Right? They're pointing at the same limitations of the Russian military. And this is not like a recent phenomenon or an old phenomenon. This is an ongoing problem that Russia has. Right? Even today, they have big financial problems, and that's a big part of it. So the masses do zero research and know nothing. All they'll know is a simple, dumbass wave that's passed, which is based on nothing. Right? No one does any research. No one knows anything, really. They just know the wave. Now, they'll get mad and upset, but if you ask them, they'll know nothing. So Russian forces are a hybrid of 4 different types. One is one-year force conscripts. Right? They're only, in the force for a year. They don't want to be there. They don't learn anything. They don't learn any warfighting skills. 2-year contract servicemen, which are a little better than these guys. A small core of professional career contract servicemen. These are the best. And then there's increasing reliance upon private military and security contractors. Russian heavy reliance on conscripts is due to fiscal weakness. Recall that Russia's economy is 13 times smaller than the USA's. 13 times smaller than the USA's. Over half as small as California's economy alone. Alright, so 65%, more like 75%, of Russian forces consist of forced conscripts who have a choice between 1-year conscription or a 2-year contract in exchange for better pay and privileges. So they're going to state 65%, but really it's higher because the forced conscripts have a choice between 1-year conscription or a 2-year contract. So they're classified as contract soldiers, but they're not really. They're just the same forced conscripts who opt for a 2-year contract because it's better pay and better privileges, like not having to live in the barracks. And the barracks can be pretty nasty and rough. Called 2-and-done soldiers. All right, so these guys, they're not going to be career professional soldiers. They're just doing their 2 and they're out. These guys are doing 1 and they're out. All right. So the contracted soldiers are intended to be the trigger pullers, while the 1-year conscripts receive little training and only serve as, quote, drivers, cooks, laborers, or low-level maintenance personnel, unquote. Conscripts would be unable to be effective. Oh, here's another quote. Quote, conscripts would be unable to be effective warfighters on the modern battlefield because the conscription period in the Russian Federation has been reduced to 1 year. That's from a website called Global Security. Now, these guys should know how to be warfighters. Right? Imagine a convoy, a supply convoy. Well, that's a prime target for attack. Right? If the truck drivers are not warfighters, they're just going to get whacked bad and slaughtered. Right? So truck drivers have to be combat qualified. Right? Same with cooks and laborers, or toilet cleaners, or truck repairmen, whatever. Right? Let's say you're at a base and it comes under attack, right? A big attack, whatever, a lot of sappers or whatever. If these guys aren't aiding in the war fighting, they're useless. They're all going to get whacked. So these guys must be able to fight, and they're not being trained to fight. They're just bodies to be used for, support reasons. So roughly 35%, but I say it's more like 25%. The estimates I've read are 25%, but this is kind of like a more official based upon the numbers that the Russians present, right, of ground forces are staffed by professional soldiers. Right? Note the actual number is obscured by Russian lumping together of the two-and-done contract soldiers, who are really just a little better than the 1 year, forced conscripts, with the career contract soldiers. They are not the same. Two-and-done soldiers are forced conscripts who sign contracts only to improve their forced conscription prison term. Right? If they're going to serve it, well, they want something better. They want a little better pay, better living conditions. Right? They make the choice. Sacrifice that for 2 years. Russian overdependence on ineffective forced conscripts is due to fiscal inability to pay for a fully professional Western-style military force, like the nations of NATO, like the United States, like Asian nations like Japan and South Korea, so forth. In Putin's own words, quote, "We are gradually going away from conscript service in general. We are doing this, unfortunately, at a slower pace, and they're still at this point. They still have financial problems. They're not improving. Slower pace than planned in connection with budget constraints." What does budget constraints means? They're poor. They don't have the money. According to a report by the National Council of Eurasian and East European Research, quote, "The government is struggling to turn the dilapidated and demoralized military into a modern professional force, a volunteer force." All right? Okay. So, right, the great, scary Russian threat, the lean, mean fighting machine. No, it's dilapidated and demoralized. All right? All right, and they're struggling to change that. And they're failing. All right? If anyone attacks, Russia is their force is so elite and professional. Why don't you read a resource? Why don't you get in touch with reality? We know reality. We know one-word reality. Really. Unbelievable. We know what everyone's saying in a 10-second blurb. Alright, so reasons why Russian conscript system fails to form an effective fighting force. Alright, one is 1 year conscripts are not given warfighting skills and only serve as menial laborers. The two-and-done contract soldiers are little better than the 1 year conscript soldiers, given that their primary motive is improved pay and living conditions during their forced conscription prison term sentence. Right? They got to do this. Right? I mean, a lot of people draft dodge over there. I don't know the exact numbers, but I read it's high during the Chechen wars and throughout their history. I know roughly their history from the Crimean War to the Russo-Japanese War, World War I, World War II, Afghanistan, Chechen War, Georgia, and in all the wars but Georgia, there was high rates of conscription and evasion and desertion. All right. The Crimean War, it was really bad because a big part of the population were slaves. They had a large serf population, which are essentially slaves. Right? In Western professional militaries, small unit leadership and training is provided by non-commissioned officers, NCOs, right, which are senior enlisted. However, in the Russian military, much of the NCOs are two-and-done soldiers with little more training themselves and are ineffective at small unit leadership and training. Thus, this role falls upon Russian junior officers, for which there is a shortage due to horrible pay. A Russian Army junior lieutenant makes 2,600 rubles a month, equivalent to $85 a month. Though the Russian NCOs do not provide leadership or training, they do conduct a form of abuse called Dedovshchina, in, quote, unofficial but deeply institutionalized practice. I mean, this has been embedded within their military for a long time. That is brutal and often lethal and undermines small unit cohesion, which is so vital to all forms of combat. According to Russian military expert Alexander Goltz, quote, the secret burials of those who have been killed, right, lethal, the shameful explanations about the war in Ukraine, and the cynical refusal to acknowledge the country's own soldiers who have been taken prisoner, all have a negative impact on the attitudes of many towards service. Bad attitude towards service. All right. Yeah, lean, mean fighting machine. Conscripts report savage beatings, torture, extortion, lurid threats, routine humiliation. This sounds worse than prison. Remember I said it's a 1-year prison term? That's the way they're looking at it. Like, we got to do this for a year, right? It is brutal, right? It's more like a U.S. detention center at Bagram or Abu Ghraib, right? Where there's torture and humiliation. Right? Much of this is just humiliation, right? Like that's going to get you actionable intelligence, instead of making radical terrorists. The report by the National Council of Eurasian and European Research states, quote, barracks violence nurtures disparaging and hostile attitudes among Russia's young men, and, quote, the economic crisis of the transition have pressed the armed forces to greater extremes in the challenge of supporting their troops with basic needs, thereby lowering morale and exacerbating problems of extortion and violence in the ranks. So they don't have the funding to even supply basic needs, food, whatever, all right, shelter, warmth, right, and that undermines morale. Right? If you're hungry and cold, you're not happy about the situation. You're not getting trained. You're being abused, right? And because of that, there's extortion and violence, right? People don't have enough. They'll take it from others so that they have less, but they get more. Right? It's dog eat dog. You know what it's like? It's like one of those experiments where you control the density of rat population in a cage, and you increase it to the point where they start eating each other. I mean, it's not that bad, but that's kind of the idea. These guys are, so that's what this guy's saying. It exacerbates the problem of extortion and violence because they don't have enough. This failure of the Russian government to provide adequate support of basic needs of soldiers and the Russian tradition of violent abuse of conscripts led the chairperson of the Soldiers' Mothers Committee in Sochi to complain, quote, I cannot understand why the Army spends so much resources on rounding these youths up and so pathetically little on feeding, training, and caring for them once they're in service. I mean, that sums it all up, right? Not feeding them well enough, not training them, not caring for them, and they're being abused by NCOs. And these explained Russia's high rates of draft dodging and desertion, especially during the Chechen Wars, but really it's throughout their history. I mean, I've read about Russian wars, from the Crimean War on that I studied. Earlier stuff I haven't studied, but from then on, and they've always experienced high rates of conscription evasion and desertion. That's a tradition in Russia. This is old school. Real Russian shortfall failures have been demonstrated in the recent wars in Chechnya, and they lost the first Chechen War and Georgia. They stumbled, bumbled over themselves and barely beat Georgia. Well, I don't want to say barely beat, but they had a lot of failures in Georgia. So there was failures of command and control and communication, failures in battlefield organization, coordination and inter-service mutual support, like air support for ground forces, air support for Army, lack of cohesion at all levels, quote, backbiting between units and senior commanders was so alarming, ground force troops and internal troops distrusted each other, and the air forces felt little concern towards supporting those fighting on the ground. And, quote, hardly anyone wearing a uniform trusted the politicians in Moscow, unquote. In the Chechen Wars, officers openly rebelled Right? So the open mutiny, and by January 1995, the Army was close to mutiny, almost refusing to obey the ridiculous orders of its commanders and the government in Moscow. So there was a big morale cohesion problem, discipline problem. The scary Russian, lean, mean fighting machine. Yeah, right. In Chechnya, senior Russian officers demonstrated little regard for her strategy and made no attempt to understand fundamental fighting motives of Chechen rebels, which is an essential military strategy. Indiscriminate artillery and air bombardment of urban centers caused widespread civilian casualties, which fueled both the insurgency and radical Islamism. So they're making these jihadists, right? You know, I mean, that's what it is. When you have widespread civilian casualties of innocent, widespread death of innocents, man, it just fuels hatred. You know, you're taking moderates, right? People who want to stay out of the fight. You're making them radical, you know, maniacs, right? Who are going to get some payback. Lack of discipline had the same effect, fueling enemy will to fight. Looting, rape, murder, rampant crime were a constant factor. Here's a quote. Rebels would often rearm themselves simply by buying guns from the Russian soldiers, desperate for some food or drink. Morale hit rock bottom. Some 540 NCOs and officers, including at least a dozen generals, resigned rather than serve in the war or on receiving especially objectionable orders, unquote. Okay? All this looting, rape, murder, man, you're just making more enemies. Failure of morale. Russian soldiers were dispirited, disorganized, poorly led, badly fed, and cold, without any clear idea why they were fighting. Pay was low and often late. They sold the weapons for food due to logistical failure. Can't give enough food for the troops. That's always good for morale. You're starving. Some of your key characteristics of Russian military manpower. Lack of training, lack of tactical expertise and understanding, lack of technical competence, poor organization, communication, and battlefield coordination, poor inter-service mutual support. For example, poor air support for ground forces, disregard of the Air Force for the ground forces, failure in intelligence and surveillance, causing lack of situational awareness, right? Which is huge. Intel is huge in the military. Failures of unit cohesion and regimental esprit. Lack of discipline in terms of combat integrity and atrocities committed. Right? So you're not fighting well. And then you're just making more enemy. Right? You're making radicals out of people who would rather stay out of the fight. How stupid is that? High rates of draft dodging and desertion. Pilfering and corruption that destroys material readiness. All right? You know, remember we talked about even explosive reactive armor on tanks. And most of all, lack of morale and fighting motive. That's huge. Morale is huge. This is why you fight, right? The will to fight. I mean, that's the biggest part of human resource value in military. The want to fight. All right. Furthermore, so they got problems all around. They got problems in recruiting. They got problems in training. Problems in discipline. Problems in team building, problems in small unit cohesion, problems in regimental esprit, culture, mutually reinforced. I mean, they don't want to be there. All right? Furthermore, Army divisions are manned at only 50 to 75% level. I'll just skip through this real quick. Basically, the idea is this. They only keep low levels of units manned at any time. And when there's a need, they'll call up reserves, and the reserves are pulled up hastily, ad hoc, and they're ill-trained, poorly organized, and this leads to battlefield coordination failures, right? As demonstrated in Georgia conflict. So also Russia is increasingly relying on private military security contractors. These are mercenaries, which, although they may be effective at protecting Russian interests in third world countries, I don't know, like a diamond mine or, you know, cobalt mine or whatever, you know, titanium, you know, mine or whatever, right? But they stand little chance against U.S. or NATO forces, as demonstrated in their slaughter at the February 18th battle at Kashan, right? So these private military forces are not, do not have the major military equipment, major aircraft, major, artillery and so forth, all right? On February 7th of 2018, a force of 500 plus Russian security contractors and Syrians with 27 tanks and armored personnel carriers attempted to seize a ConocoPhillips gas facility protected by a team of only 30 U.S. Delta Force and Ranger soldiers, right? Secretary of Defense Mattis ordered the attacking force be annihilated. Air power and artillery were employed in the form of Marine artillery rockets, B-52 bombers, F-15E Strike Eagles, AC-130 Spectre gunships, AH-64 attack helicopters, and F-22 fighters for top cover combat air patrol. So here is an example of a Marine artillery battery firing a rocket. Here's a B-52 dropping bombs. And I know during the Vietnam War, they would load these up with about 70,000 pounds of bombs. All right? That was overloading them, but they can do that. And then F-15E Strike Eagles carry about 23,000 pounds of bombs. Right? This is a lot. This is a lot of firepower coming down here. And then you have AC-130 gunships. And what they do is they fly in a circle. Same with the helicopters. So here's the idea. The red is a concentrated, target enemies here. The helicopters will circle, right, around them and just unleash hell on them, right? They have 8 laser-guided Hellfire missiles, and they have 30 unguided, or actually 40 unguided rockets, 2.75-inch rockets, and they have a 30-millimeter automatic gun. It's called a chain gun, and it's like a machine gun cannon firing explosive rounds. They'll circle, and higher above, you have the Spectre gunship circling, and it's got a lot of firepower. It's got a 105 millimeter. It's basically a tank cannon. It's an artillery cannon, but it's the same. It's the same size as a tank cannon, like an M60 would have a 105 cannon. And then they have a 40 millimeter cannon. This is an automatic cannon. Boom, 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 boom. This is manually reloaded. You can probably fire like 10 rounds a minute. This can fire a lot faster. And it's 40 millimeter, which is like an anti-aircraft cannon. And they have a 25 millimeter Gatling gun. These fire about 55 cannon rounds a second. Every second they're spitting out 55. It doesn't sound like a machine gun. It's more like, it's a constant, growl. They're coming out so fast, all right? And this is just saturating the ground. You concentrate in that target zone, and you're just wiping out people, all right? All these is just a major slaughter. All right, and the F-22s are just flying, fighter cover. Shoot down any other Russian aircraft coming in to help them. So in the battle, 0 Americans were wounded or killed. No casualties, 0 casualties for Americans, while intercepted radio calls from the Russian mercenaries indicate over 210 Russians killed. Right? Now, I'm going to admit that this number is debatable because the Russian government at first claimed 0. They said, oh, none were killed. And then they increased the number to 5. Said 5 were killed. All right? But Russia has an obvious motive to deny this embarrassment, especially with Putin's re-election only 5 weeks away. And Putin was saying that we're winning, we're kicking ass in Syria, right? If they admit this, right, then no one's going to trust him, right? It's just like how during the Vietnam War, President Johnson and General Westmoreland, who was a commander of MAC-V in Vietnam, right? They're both saying, "Oh, victory's right around the corner. We got them on the run. They're on their last leg," right? And then they launched a Tet offensive, a big offensive, and no one believed them. How are they on their last leg where they can launch such a big offensive throughout the country? So, I mean, that's what would happen there. I believe the statements of the Russian soldiers in the wake of the battle are more telling. I trust them more than the Russian government. But you know, there's going to be a debate here because the number is uncertain. If they can make it a debate, they will. They'll shift all focus on it and say, it's debatable, he's crazy, right? I mean, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at what the Russian soldiers had to say, right? And keep in mind, this is the firepower that they used here. All this, right? Quote, to make it short, we've had our asses effing kicked. So one squadron effing lost 200 people right away. Another lost 10 people. And I don't know about the third squadron, but it got torn up pretty badly too. So 3 squadrons took a beating. The Yankees attacked. First they blasted the F out of us by artillery. And then they took 4 helicopters up and pushed us in a effing merry-go-round with heavy caliber machine guns. They were all shelling the holy F out of it, and our guys didn't have anything besides assault rifles. Nothing at all. Not even mentioning shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles or anything like that. So they tore us to pieces for sure. Put us through hell. All right. So the rockets came first, then the Apaches, and then whatever. Quote, we got our effing asses beat rough. My men called me. They're there drinking now. Many have gone missing. It's a total F up. It sucks. Another takedown. Everybody you know treats us like pieces of crap. They beat our asses like we're little pieces of crap. But our effing government will go in reverse now, and nobody will respond or anything, and nobody will punish anyone for this. So these are our casualties. They're hung out to dry. They're expendable. Out of all our vehicles, only 1 tank survived and 1 BRDM, which is an armored reconnaissance vehicle. I don't know if it's tracked or if that's wheeled, hard-wheeled. I believe they have turrets. They have a gun turret on there. After the attack, all other BRDMs and tanks were destroyed in the first minutes of the fight right away. Right? Their artillery started effing ours really hard. Their effing choppers flew in and started effing everybody. Ours just running around, just got a call from a pal. So there are about 215 effing killed. They simply rolled ours out effing hard, made their point. What the F ours are hoping for in there, that they will effing run away themselves. Hope the effing scare them away. Lots of people effed up so bad. Can't be effing ID'd. There was no foot soldier on the American side. They simply effed our convoy with artillery. Mostly air support with some rocket artillery. And I believe these were at hand first, shot these first, and air support usually takes a little bit longer to come in. With the amount of U.S. firepower present, along with 25 out of 27 vehicles, only 1 tank and 1 BRDM survived, right? 25 out of 27 vehicles destroyed. It is virtually impossible to believe the Russian government reported deaths, right? 0 or 5 deaths. I mean, come on, it's impossible. The testimony of the Russian soldiers who were there is far more likely, all right? I mean, I'm not saying it's exactly 200, whatever, right? But it's probably closer to that, right? Given all this massive firepower. Keep that in mind, right? But the number is in question, so liars will manufacture a big bogus debate, shift the focus of the masses onto it and off of all other facts, and then make a big dumbass wave attack in social reality. Right? No one's going to remember a single fact. All they'll have is that one thing in their mind, right? Which will work because the 99% know nothing else other than the simple, stupid, 10-second blurb written at the 4th grade level that's passed in a big wave. right? Everyone reads their phone. I know reality. I know what's going on because I read this in 10 seconds. And that's all they'll know. So I'm saying it's much more likely that the higher number is correct, given that if this is you got these Apaches circling and circling, dumping all this like laser-guided rockets on them, unguided rockets, right, that fire out in barrages, and cannon rounds. I mean, you just watch a YouTube channel for gun sight for Apache AH-64s, right? You know, one helicopter's killing 10, 15, sometimes up to 20 guys with their cannon only, let alone all the rockets. And then you got an AC-130 flying above it, right? Just spewing down. Then you got F-15s and B-52s dumping down. And you had the rockets already. I mean, these guys just got pummeled. Right? It's hard to believe. You know, to me, it'd be hard to believe it's less than 200. Well, I mean, maybe not hard to believe, but you know, it's definitely impossible to believe. With 25 and 27 vehicles destroyed, it's impossible to believe that 0 or 5. All right. Now, again, I don't know the exact number. So a 30-man American force was attacked by a Russian-Syrian force 17 times larger, 17-to-1 ratio, 17 of these guys to every one American. And the Americans suffered no casualties, no one wounded, no one dead, no injury, while the Russians were likely lost over 200 killed. I said likely again because the number's debatable, so the liars will manufacture an attack here, shift all focus onto it, then say, see, it's all bullshit. And thus, off of all the facts, which the masses retain 0 of anyways, the masses retain 0 facts. They'll never admit to that. They'll get mad if you say that. But if you ask them, they can tell you nothing. Finally, the battle lasted 4 hours with Russian fighter aircraft only 15 minutes away. Oh, you know what? I was going to make... well, I don't know. If this is Syria, this would be like where the battle occurred on the east side, and they have an air base over here on the west side, but it's only 300 miles away. You know, these fighter aircraft can easily make that in 10 minutes, right? Once they're in the air, they can ramp up the speed, get there in 10 minutes, 15 minutes easily. All right? Okay. All right. Let's see here. Where was I here? Yeah, okay. So they're at this Air Force base, and none responded, so the private military security contractors were left hung out to dry. They were expendable. And besides, the Russian fighter planes would have all been shot down. All right, by the F-22s. Anyway, for example, remember how I told you that F-15 versus mostly Russian aircraft have a kill ratio of 104 to 0, right? 104 killed, no losses, right? Well, the F-22 has the same ratio over the F-15, right? So there's practice dogfights where the F-22 goes against F-15s, one F-22 against 6 F-15s. Remember, each F-15 has a 104 kill ratio to 0 against Russian planes. You take one of these against 6 of these, and every single F-15 is shot down with 0 losses of F-22s. So not only F-15s way superior to Russian planes, F-22s are way superior to F-15s. So these F-22s are going to shoot down every damn Russian plane that comes in the air, and they'll never see these. All right. All right. So let's take a look at a summary of their military force structure. All right. Let's get something real here, as opposed to social reality, history, ha ha ha, right? Unbelievable, ha ha ha, debatable. All right. Do some actual research. Russian military is a hybrid force consisting of 4 things: 1-year force conscripts, 2-year contract soldiers, a small corps of professional contract soldiers who Russia cannot pay well and fall short in terms of Western standards for training. roughly 25%. Private military security contractors, which have numerous fundamental weaknesses. All right. 75% of Russian forces consist of one-year force conscripts or two-and-done contract soldiers who are essentially conscripts who sign up for 2 years for better pay and privileges. Thus, the two-and-done contract soldiers are a little better trained and motivated than the one-year conscripts. Only roughly 25% of Russian forces consist of the professional contract soldiers, but Russia is having trouble retaining these as well as junior officers due to low pay, due to the fact that Russia is a poor country with a low GDP. Right? Russia is fiscally unable to abandon forced conscription. Right? They've been trying, they can't get rid of them. They're still the bulk. I just read a report that was dated, I believe it was June of 2020, right? That said 65% is still forced conscripts. Right? And you know, I read it's higher because they lumped together the two-and-done contract soldiers with the professional contract soldiers. So that's not really 35% of the professionals. It's less. Russian conscripts are severely abused and humiliated. They're poorly trained, extorted, insufficiently provided for. This results in combat ineffectiveness, low morale. I mean, they're hating it there. They just want to get the hell out. Poor unit cohesion, low unit esprit, low motivation, high resentment, and there's high draft dodging and desertions, right? Especially during wartime. That's throughout their history. Every damn war. You know, I mean, including World War II. I read there's a lot of desertions, right? Maybe not as crazy as like Crimean War or you know, other wars, because they're fighting for their lives in World War II. But there's still desertions. But you know, Crimean War, bad. Russo-Japanese War, you know, it was a short war, but there's still desertion, draft dodging. World War I, it was bad, right? World War II, not as bad. Afghanistan, there was a lot of draft dodging and desertions. Chechnya, well, there was a lot of draft dodging and desertions. And only Georgia, because Georgia was so damn short. You know, what was it, like 8-9 days or something like that? You know, you don't have a chance to really... Okay, so ineffective NCO Corps, with junior officers having to perform their role as troop trainers and small unit leaders, and there is a shortage of junior officers due to low pay. Proven battlefield failures. Okay, this is proven in the field. Failures in command and control. I mean, read it. Do some research. Read a book on the Chechen Wars. Read a book on Georgia invasion. Failures in battlefield organization coordination. Lack of inter-service mutual support, lack of cohesion at all levels, distrust of the military leaders and politicians in Moscow, lack of discipline, high rates of pilfering and corruption, undermining material readiness, failure of logistic support, undermining morale, low ammunition, hungry and cold. Man, you're just hating your supply corps guys, leaving you in the lurch like this. There appears to be an increasing Russian reliance on private military security contractors, which is not a sign of strength, but a weakness. From a historic perspective, mercenaries have always proven poor forces, right? Lacking will to fight, a lack of they're fighting only from pay, right? I mean, you know, is that pay worth as much as their life? Hell no. Lack of discipline, right? A lot of atrocities. Poorly equipped, high rate of desertion, right? Even switching sides for better food and pay. You know, I read this in history books where they switch sides. You had mercenaries say, oh, you know, they eat better over there and they get more money. Let's switch sides. And they switch sides. You know, how willing are they going to pay? How willing are they going to fight? High rates of collateral damage and atrocities against civilians. You know, one example is the 30-year war. I mean, that stands out in mind. How they destroyed, you know, vast parts of Central Europe, right? Just destroyed societies. Uh, so human resource morale on a national level is strategic, right? So we're going to examine two things that are follow-on topics. One is the historic high rate of conscription evasion and desertions, right? And how Russia failed, how failed Russian wars spark revolutions. So when they have an unpopular failed war, right, there's a good chance of a revolution, which is another vulnerable Russian underbelly, like the Caucasus Emirates. Remember we said the North Caucasus are a vulnerable Russian underbelly? They've broken away so many times. They're itching to break away, right? Every time there's a war, right, they're ready to break away. And Russia goes running off on some adventuristic, offensive, which they're just going to get locked down in a bloody proxy war. Let's say in Ukraine, they try to have a major offensive into all of Ukraine, right? Not playing a proxy war in eastern Ukraine, but a major offensive in Ukraine, or like Estonia, or it's going to be a bloody proxy war. Well, if they go against Estonia or Latvia, they're going against NATO. They're going to get their ass kicked, right? And when you have wars like that, it sparked revolutions, right? So that's a vulnerable underbelly, just like the Caucasus Emirates, which is strategic because there's oil and gas pipelines running through there. They break away. Russia's got problems, right? How will all of this information be attacked? Well, first of all, no one's going to retain this. 99.99999% of the population will retain nothing. Most aren't even paying attention. All they'll know is a simple, stupid, lying thing passed in social reality, in a 10-second blurb written at the 4th grade level that any simple-minded person can read. That's all they'll know. Right? So they'll shift all focus off of everything onto a single point attack that can be made debatable, like how many Russians were killed in the Battle of Kasham. And then the liars will say, see, here's BS, don't believe any of this, based on one little measly point that they shift all focus on. Or they'll just mock with one-word reality, like, oh, history, ha, ha, really? Really? Unbelievable, debatable. There's nothing to that. There's no facts whatsoever. No one does any research. No one knows anything. But that dominates their belief. They'll know nothing, but it'll be the sole dominant belief based on one-word reality. Nothing. And these simple tricks will work because the masses will have retained zero what I taught. And they work every time. I've explained these thousands of times. Right? Each of them at least 1,000 times. And it still works every time. I'm explaining it again. And you know what? They'll use it again. They'll use it to attack this explanation. They will. Ho, ho, ho. History. All they will know is a simple crap that is waved in front of their faces in social reality, which consists of a 10-second blurb written at the 4th grade level and made into a big wave. If it's a big wave, it's real. That's the reality. What's waved in front of their face. Simple, stupid, easy to understand. Easy to read. Doesn't take but 10 seconds. Maybe not even that. It is easy to read, understand, and retain, and therefore it dominates mass perceptions, especially when they know nothing else. And that is social reality. In a nutshell. Big, fat, empty nothing. But everyone believes it. Because everyone's saying it. Based on that alone. Alright. So they're weak as far as human resources. Read. Do some research. Read for yourself. But I know that's not going to happen. You're not going to read jack.